Colonel Suarez.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Warren, Ranking Member Scott, and distinguished members of this committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Vic Suarez, and I've recently retired from the U.S. Army after 27 and a half years of active service as a medical service and acquisition corps officer, specializing in the advanced development of biologics, managing the medical supply chain, and leading America's finest sons and daughters as a commander 4 times, twice in the combat zone. During the past 10 years, I've been heavily involved in the advanced development of biodefense medical countermeasures, served as the Chief of Staff of the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research, and was selected by General Gus Perna to serve at Operational Warp Speed from 2020 to 2021 as the lead vaccine program manager. I'm speaking today primarily in my role as a founder of Blue Zone Bioscience, a life science consulting firm. When I left active duty 6 months ago, my principal goal was to affiliate with organizations that were mission aligned with my responsibilities in the DoD, including enhancing national security and protecting human health, and to that end, supporting domestic companies that could support those 2 missions. To this end, I've partnered with 2 organizations, the Council on Strategic Risks and the Securing of America's Medicines and Supply Coalition. Both organizations are focused on ensuring access to essential medicines for patients and the warfighter. On November 27, 2023, the Department of Defense, in response to the FY23 National Defense Authorization Act, Section 860, provided the Senate and House Armed Services Committee an interim risk report on the department's reliance on overseas-derived pharmaceuticals. A significant finding was that 54% of the national drug codes sourced from the DoD had active pharmaceutical ingredients, or API, and excipients, non-API, that came from non-Trade Agreement Act compliant countries, including China. This recent finding presents a clear and present danger to national security. It should compel us to explore better legislative and trade policies that strengthen our federal acquisitions and economic and health security to reduce our reliance on overseas essential medicines, their key starting materials, and API. We must manufacture more of these materials domestically to ensure high-quality manufacturing processes and products, including a reliable and resilient material medical supply chain supporting this essential industry. A major contributing factor to this national security and health security risk is a little-known but controversial court case titled Acetris Health, LLC versus the United States. In this case, the United States Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit overruled a long-standing precedent regarding the origin of a drug by ruling that a drug could be considered to be manufactured or substantially transformed in the U.S. and sold to the federal government, even if its API and all of its components, to include excipients, were manufactured in TAA-banned countries. Today, a Chinese firm could make all the API and precursor materials for a medicine, ship it to a U.S. subsidiary that does packaging and final labeling, and still be able to label it as American-made. This would be considered an American-made drug and principally illustrates this loophole. In my testimony today, I wish to highlight a dysfunctional market where generic drug companies compete in a race to the bottom in generic drug pricing and manufacturing, a principal driver of drug shortages, which just 2 weeks ago, as you mentioned earlier, Senator, was reported by the American Society of Health System Pharmacists that our nation is at an all-time high since 2001 of 323 known drug shortages. Overwhelming downward pressure in generic drug costs with no consideration for supply reliability or quality leads domestic manufacturers to operate at approximately 50% utilization capacity. Many of these domestic companies are closing plants and essential medicine production lines or being acquired by foreign entities, which will only downgrade our nation's ability to independently provide health care for its citizens during a global pandemic or during a national security event. Finally, I want to applaud the Department of Defense efforts to assess these strategic risks through both the assessment of the origins supply chain at the Defense Logistics Agency, as well as the Uniformed Services University Pharmaceutical Assessment of Quality Pilot Study, or FACS, as both these efforts will provide more transparency and potentially enable millions of our servicemen and women, their families, and other TRICARE retirees like me confidence that when they go to a military treatment facility in the U.S. or serve in combat, that they will always have access to the highest quality medicines at the most affordable prices. Something that is possible if we're willing to disrupt the status quo. Thank you for your attention as I raise these significant considerations concerning our nation's over-reliance on non-trade agreement act nations for our pharmaceuticals, and I encourage Congress and this committee in particular to closely monitor and support the DoD's efforts to care for our warfighters, their families, and retired military. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Colonel Suarez. I appreciate it.